Good morning, everybody. It is Fraud Watch Friday. I'm Bruce Carlson with the ARP Washington State Office. And today we're going to be talking about QR codes. You can see one right there next to me. I don't know much about it, but I see them everywhere now. And so to tell us what they are, what the risks are, especially of being defrauded, I've got our good friend Dave Morrow here today. Dave, how's things going?
Good, good. How about yourself?
Things are good. I'm going to be coming your way. I'm heading up to Bellingham for the Western Washington University graduation tomorrow. So hopefully it won't be pouring down rain
Yeah, I hope not.
as it has been here.
Yeah, well, it's been
Um,
raining here, but it's pretty up here today, so maybe we'll keep our fingers crossed for the weekend.
I'm hoping so. I'm just hoping it's just sunny long enough to take a picture and we'll be good.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we do in Bellingham when we visit our daughters, we go out to the restaurants there in Bellingham. And one thing I've dealt with a lot is they don't have menus anymore. They only have the
Yeah.
QR codes. If you in a restaurant, you've seen the little QR codes on the little plastic thing, and you have to put your phone up there, and
Yep.
then the menu comes up. And of course, I don't have strong enough glasses on to see them. But that's another problem. But QR codes, that's the place that I see them. But I know they're everywhere and all over and more popular. And you showed me a little bit about how QR codes work. And in fact, the code that we had up leads to our Fraud Watch Network
Yep.
website, which I thought was pretty amazing. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can tell us all about
Okay.
this subject that is sort of on the cutting edge of fraud these days.
Yeah. QR codes have been around for a while. They've been around for at least 10 years, but they just kind of right before COVID started, people were really trying to use them a lot. And they kind of went on a curve and it was starting to go down. And then COVID hit and we went into all the isolation and social distancing and all that. And its use has really kind of exploded since then because the use of a QR code keeps people from having to handle menus and things like that. So now you see them a lot more places than you used to like 2 years ago. And what a QR code is basically everybody knows what a barcode is. Everybody's seen barcodes and knows how to scan them at the register at the grocery store and stuff like that. Well, a QR code is just basically a more sophisticated version of a barcode. QR stands for quick response. And a QR code is, the advantage of it over a traditional barcode is there's a lot more information you can store on the QR code because instead of just going across like a barcode does, it goes up, down, and across, and there's rows and there's just a lot of information in it. And so QR codes, like every technology, have a good use and a bad use. They're kind of dual use, if you will, because there's just, as we've talked about, you find QR codes all over the place. They can take you to websites, they can show you menus in restaurants, they can help you get applications for your phone. They can also now, I mean, we were on a trip a couple of months ago in Europe, and all of our COVID testing was done using QR codes. Every document we had a QR code on it. So there's really a lot of uses for it now, but there's also bad uses for it. And that's where the bad guys, the fraudsters, have picked up these things and just kind of incorporated this technology into their existing capabilities and their ways of doing fraud. And there's been several pretty large frauds carried out in the last 4 or 5 years using QR codes. There was one in Germany where there was a very large QR code involving a bank, and there was one in the U.S. involving a bank where customers got emails, supposedly very real-looking emails, phishing emails supposedly from the bank with a QR code on it, and when they held their phones up to it or scanned the QR code, it took them to a website that looked like the bank's website again, and they basically took their personal information and passwords and things like that from that website. Chicago also had just recently an interesting one where somebody was taking stickers and with a fake QR code and putting it on the parking meters and saying that we have an app. This is the Chicago Parking Authority's digital currency or digital parking application, and scan this and you will download an application and you can pay for your parking that way. Well, it was all a fraud. they have a parking authority, but they don't. The parking authority didn't use this app, and somebody had taken and gotten quite a bit of money that way because they got actual money that people were putting aside for parking, paying for parking, as well as the credit cards and stuff they were using to put behind that so that they could pay their parking. So it was a pretty remunerative thing for them, and that was just not too long ago in Chicago. So I learned some things when I was about phishing and QR codes. We talked about phishing all the time. QR codes is just the latest spin, but of course we've come up with a name for it now. It's called quishing now. So if you hear the word quishing, that's QR code phishing with a QR code in the email or the text. So there's a couple of things you can do to keep from being a victim or to lessen your chances of being a victim. You know that you can, most people know now that with phones, you can just hold it up with your camera and read the QR code. So when you do that, like when I hold my iPhone up, Safari comes up and it says, going to this website, and it gives me the URL. When you do that, make sure that you know where you're going when you get on that, and when you scan it and you look at it before you tap it and say, take me to it. Look at that URL and make sure it's really the URL you want to go to. If you the QR code we just put up there, if you scan on your phone, it'll take you to our Fraud Watch Network website with aarp.org. But it should tell you where, before it takes you there, it should tell you at the top, this is where we're going to take you, and you click on it. So make sure, be careful where you go with a QR code. If you know it's supposed to send you to a certain website, make sure it's going to take you there, and it will show you the URL. As with all phishing emails and things, don't open phishing mails or any mail with a QR code in it and automatically accept it. Treat it with the same skepticism you treat any kind of phishing email or phishing text. And just because it comes from a friend or appears to come from a friend doesn't mean it really is from that friend. So all the normal things we've talked about, and being careful about reading emails and reading text messages and just not accepting them at face value, but doing a little due diligence behind them. Same thing. Most phones now will automatically, with their camera, if they're less than about 4 or 5, 6 years old, they'll automatically read QR codes as part of the camera's logic, and you don't have to have a special reader for it. But if you buy a reader application or an application that lets you prepare or generate QR codes, make sure you understand and do some due diligence, because there's been quite a few fraudsters who've put applications on Google Play and the Apple App Store to deal with QR codes, either reading or generating them, when in reality they had malware in them. So if you need one of those for whatever reason, make sure you understand what you need to get, do some due diligence, and find a reputable one, and then get that one from the store. Bruce, I think that's kind of what I know. I've just done a dump on the QR codes right now.
Well, actually, this is great, because now I know a lot more than I did. And, I think it's kind of a little mysterious when you point your phone or, add a QR code, where it's going and what it's doing. So, I think the point to check the URL before you actually go there is probably a good idea. But one of the things that we wanted to try was actually to put up the QR code, and I'm gonna demonstrate. If you got your phone, put it on the camera
and point it at that.
And now I got a picture of me, which isn't good. But I'm gonna try this and see if it works. So if you bring your phone up to the camera here, just kind of like that, and there it says arp.org. It gives a little window, and then it comes up to our ARP Fraud Watch website there. So that's basically how QR codes kind of work in the real world, if you haven't tried that. So if you have your phone handy, put it up to the code. We guarantee this one is not fraudulent, or Dave does anyway.
Oh yeah.
And honestly, I stand behind Dave, so I guarantee it too. Give it a try and see what happens. Like if you've been nervous about trying them in restaurants, or that's the place where I use them. Give it a try and see how you like it, because it does work pretty easily, and it's one of those conveniences of the modern world that are very useful, but as Dave said, also offer fraudsters a chance to take advantage and scam you. So, I
Let me
guess
say
that's
one
it.
thing,
Oh,
Bruce. Let me
sorry.
say
Go
one
ahead.
thing that it's very easy. I generated that QR code in about 2 seconds because I know Google Chrome does, and I think Firefox probably does too. It's built into it where you can generate a QR code. It's very easy. If you're on a website, all you do is with a little square up in the upper right hand corner with the arrow pointing up, you click on that, and about the third thing down is generate QR code. And if you click on it, it'll generate a QR code that leads to whatever website you are on, the URL that you're on. And that's exactly how I did it for the AARP one. So you can see how easy it is for a fraudster to do it. All they've got to do is build a fake website, build a little QR code, and start sending it out. And one of the bigger things I've read the FBI said is that a lot of people are putting them on stickers and even going into like restaurants or wherever and putting their sticker over the restaurant sticker for the menu.
Oh,
And so when you click on it, you actually go to their website or wherever they want you to go or download whatever, instead of getting the menu or getting wherever you want to go. So folks need to make sure that they examine the QR code, and if it looks like it's been tampered with, or there's a sticker over another code underneath it, or something like that, that they're very, very careful not to do that. That's one thing I
yeah.
found.
There's always those criminals who will go the extra mile to try and scam you. Fortunately, there aren't very many because most scammers are lazy. That's kind of why
Yeah,
that's why they're criminals.
yeah,
Um, but that's certainly a good tip. If a QR code looks like it's been pasted over or something, don't just trust that it's real.
yeah,
So yeah. And our advice is always, if it seems off, trust your gut.
yep.
Um, yeah. So I think that's it for this week. Definitely a new area of fraud that's being exploited. And speaking of new, I wanted to welcome all of you who may be joining us who have seen the bulletin article that came out this month. If you're joining us, thanks to that, you're in the right place, and I want to welcome you. And also, if you have questions about fraud in general, and it doesn't have to be on any certain topic, we have a session next Friday at 10:30 with Dave again, and he'll be taking your questions. And we go about 40 minutes and answer questions on email, online banking, suspicious text. How can you secure your home Wi-Fi? Dave, if there's any topics that come up that I'm missing, chime in. And then we also talk about sort of fraud news of the day as it relates to our members. So not super technical on that, just things that are going on in the fraud world. Things about Google updating their privacy settings, etc. We talk about that. But after that, it's wide open. So I'll invite you, Dave. Is there any question that you get a lot that you think people might be thinking about, and you would encourage them to ask you about next Friday
Yeah,
if you're trying to figure something out?
yeah. I mean, I get a lot of questions about what's the most common scam that people see. And based on what we see on the call center, the Fraud Watch Network call center, I would say it's tech support scams. Somebody calls you or a screen flashes up and says your computer is full of malware. You need to call this number right now. That's probably the most popular. Romance scams, we have a lot of those, and those are particularly disturbing sometimes because they often involve a lot of money, a lot of loss to the victim. And the third one is imposters. Somebody calls you and says, or sends you a text or an email and says, this is Amazon and your package is being delivered, but we're holding it and you need to pay us X amount of money in gift cards. So those three are the ones that we see a lot of in various variations of it. And the thing I jump up and down and tell people about is gift cards, and now cryptocurrency too, digital currency. If anybody insists that you pay them on using gift cards, or insists that you go and using a QR code, put money into a digital wallet at an ATM, a digital ATM at Safeway or wherever, don't do it. Run, because that's almost guaranteed to be a fraud. and it's deceptively. I've talked to several people who have been told by the fraudster that to go take cash out because the people are questioning gift cards now, and they're getting a lot more awareness not to use gift cards to pay. So they're telling them to go to the bank and cash a check for $500 and then take it to one of these digital ATMs, and they send them. The fraudster sends them a QR code, and they hold the QR code up in front of the ATM, and then put the money in, and the money automatically goes to the fraudster, and then they can't get it back. So if anybody does something like that to them, run away. That's guaranteed to be a fraud.
All right. Well, that sounds like good advice. We actually have a question in the comments, so I'm going to bring that up. Thank you very much, Jenny, for your question. And you can see it there on screen, Dave, I think. But she asked,
Sure.
Why would a private individual generate a QR code? And I think that's a good question because you sort of assume it's science or business behind it. But what do you think about this?
Well, I mean, you could do a QR code for a lot of things. If you're wanting to send an email to your, I share a lot. I'm a real annoying father with my kids because I share all kinds of information about safety online and all that for my kids and my grandkids especially. And I always hate to do the cut and the paste for all these long URLs of articles I want to send my kids to have their kids read, my grandkids read about being safe online. Well, now all I have to do is go to that website, do the little QR code thing, generate a QR code, and send it to them. And then they can my grandkids can look at it and use their phones to go to it. That would be one use case, one reason you would generate a QR code. Another one might be if you're in some volunteer organization, your church or your youth group, or if you're a Boy Scout or Girl Scout leader or something like that, and you want to share some information or just want to do a marketing of some sort. Boy Scouts up here every year do Christmas tree sales. So they may have posters and flyers and stuff and have a QR code for the website that they use for Christmas tree sales. So that would be another use case or another reason they might generate a QR code. So all you got to do is think about it. Anytime you would share a URL or send a URL or a web address to somebody, you could use a QR code just as easily.
All right. Well, that's good to know. And before you go, actually, we're going a little long because I've got some questions coming in. So let us take a look at our next question. And it's from Robin Moore Slater. And it's my husband was scammed and sent a whole bunch of our savings away. How do we get a significant loss, which was $160,000, which is very significant?
Yeah.
How do we get that investigated? Your fraud line said that the FBI won't look at losses below $250,000, and I assume the fraud line is the FraudWatch network call center.
Yeah.
Our local police took a report but did nothing. Geez, that sounds like a pretty serious situation. Do you have any thoughts on this, Dave?
Yeah, unfortunately, the situation that Robin talks about is true. The FBI, all investigative agencies usually have tripwires or levels at which they will take a case or won't take a case because they don't have enough manpower to do what they need to do anyway. So $160,000 is a significant amount of money, and usually local police departments will take a report and give you a report number, which we tell everybody to do, but they really won't investigate them because cybercrime is universal. The only thing right now, the only real remediation you have is try to get somebody, a private investigator, a private cyber investigator, and there's some out there, to try to investigate it, report it to wherever of course, report it to the bank because bank investigators will sometimes look at that too. Also, if you were on Facebook or you were on Twitter or whatever media they use to the fraudster use to contact you to carry out their scam, you can report it to them. They may or may not do much about it. IC3.gov is the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, and because there's so widespread, the FBI has this complaint center staffed by agents, and they will do investigations, but they usually don't do it off of one report. They have 100 reports, each sound the same. Each one's a kind of jigsaw puzzle piece of the case, and the analyst will read all the reports and pull it all together, and then go do an investigation. So that's probably, unfortunately, your best bet right now, because that's kind of a gap right now, is that people who lose a lot of money have very few ways to do it. Now, it kind of depends on how your family was taken advantage of. Postal inspectors, if the mails were involved, U.S. Postal Inspection Service, you can complain to them. Above and beyond, the FBI. If cryptocurrency was involved, the Secret Service does some investigations on cryptocurrency. So you can call your local Secret Service office and ask them about that. It kind of depends on how the scam was perpetrated, and if certain conditions were met, like the mails were used, or wire fraud was involved. Other investigative agencies might take it too. I'm sorry I can't give you a dry answer, Robin.
Yeah, I'd certainly put in a mention for the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. I'd never heard of them, and so we started working with them, and they've been very involved in our Operation Protect Veterans campaign. Because the mail is used on frauds that target veterans, which is a very a very disgusting crime where con artists use fake military backgrounds and sort of appeals to patriotism to scam people. But they are very aggressive on fraud, and as Dave says, because they're focused on the mail, they have a pretty narrow focus. So if the mail was used in the fraud, I would certainly contact them. And the other thing that sort of makes it worthwhile in some cases is that if you're lost, which is a huge loss, and I'm very sorry for it, but if it's part of a larger scam where there are other victims, and it rolls up to a larger amount, then you might be able to be part of a larger case where there is some sort of a resolution. Hopefully reimbursement. Unfortunately, one of the reasons we talk so much about being aware and prevention is oftentimes once the money is gone, it's very difficult to get money back, because either crime is never solved, or often the perpetrators are in foreign countries and you can't really get to them, or they disappear, they vanish, the money's gone into crypto now. So that's why it makes so much sense to try and be alert up front. And I know that doesn't help in this case. And, I certainly, again, am sympathetic, because as we've learned in our work, a lot of times, especially for that large amount of money, con artists are very sophisticated, and they're very good at what they do, and they're very persuasive, and what they present can seem very real. So, it's not a matter of, being sort of tricked in a lot of cases. A lot of times it makes a lot of sense to fall for it. That's why we are so passionate about getting the warning signs out there. So
Robin, one thing let's do, put your, if you would, in the comments to Bruce, give us your email address, and Bruce will give it to me, and I'll shoot you an email, and maybe we can brainstorm a few things. I'd really need to know more about the specifics of your case to maybe give you some real meaningful things. But if you don't mind, give us your email address in the comments. It won't get broadcast or anything, and we'll contact you and reach out and see if there's something else we can advise.
Yeah, actually, if you want to contact us, and I'll put a excuse me, getting tongue tied here. This is upsetting fraud. I hate to hear this. But Robin, if you want to send an email to Dave, you can send it to us there at the address on screen, arpwa@arp.org, and that's a private email that comes through our office, and then we'll pass that on to Dave if you choose to do that. And also, while it's up there, I'll just mention, and I'll mention this at the end when we close, if you would like a fraud presentation for your group, kind of similar to what we're doing, but not focused on one subject, it's a general fraud presentation to help you see these frauds coming and protect yourself from fraud. You can send an inquiry to that email address. And if you have a church group, civic group, sports group, community group, we do presentations for all sorts of groups. And Dave is one of our presenters, but we also have a group of other folks. We've got we've got another comment. So
All right, let's hear it.
take a look at that.
I'm here as long as they have questions.
Actually, Jan, I'm going to come back to you because Robin gave us a couple of follow-ups. So she says postal money orders were used.
Okay. Yep. Postal Inspection Service. USPIS.gov, I think, is the website. Yeah, send us your email address, Robin, and we'll reach out. Maybe we can get a little more information and give you some other ideas. But if postal money orders were used, then that's a crime that the Postal Service might be interested in.
Yeah, and I think we may have some contacts there. I can't promise that, but we can ask around. And as I said, the Postal Inspection Service, you may see them in the news very occasionally doing raids, and it's full on SWAT stuff. So they're law enforcement.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
I worked with them when I was an agent. I worked with them, and they're no fooling good agents. So
yeah.
Investigators.
So it also looks like let's get one more comment from Robin. She says Homeland Security looked at my husband's computer but told us nothing helpful. Yeah. So hopefully we've got Homeland Security involved. That's at least you're getting an investigation, and hopefully it will turn up something. But do you have any further comment on that? I know you've worked in that world, Dave.
No, I mean, if somebody who knew computer forensics looked at the computer, it was probably they probably took some evidence, but it may or may not have added to a case. See, the problem, like I said, is that digital crime cases have always been like a jigsaw puzzle. You get a piece from one victim and a piece of information from another, and as you said, there's always a lot of victims involved. Nobody is ever the only person that is taken advantage of by a fraudster. And so the more of those victims that come forward, those pieces are developed by the investigator and they put together. And there have been surprisingly large raids, either both in the US and overseas, and some significant jail times for people who do romance scams. A guy who did a romance scam here in the US up in New York just got sentenced to several years in jail and a bunch of restitution fines for doing romance scams here in the US. So again, I don't know your particular situation, Robin. Give us your email and we can engage a little bit more and talk about it and see if we can come up with some other things to do. But it sounds like you've done the things that a lot of the things we would tell you to do.
Yeah, I think people don't know, and we haven't talked about your background, Dave, on this live stream. But people don't realize that there are more law enforcement and more cybersecurity out there than just the FBI. Could you tell us a little bit about what you did in the Air Force?
Yeah, I was part of the Air Force's, or actually federal government's back in the 80s. We became the first computer crime unit in the Air Force in the federal government as an investigator. I was a member of the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, which is like if you watch NCIS on TV with Mark Harmon and all that. That's the Navy version of what we did. We were the Air Force's federal agency that did high-level criminal fraud and counterintelligence investigations. And we had one of the first cybercrime units in the federal investigations world in the 1980s, and I became a member then. I stayed with them until 1998. When I retired from the Air Force, I was the head of cybercrime investigations for the Air Force. And then I started moving into the private sector doing cybercrime investigations as well as cybersecurity. So I've been in and out of cyber investigations and cybersecurity for 35 or 40 years now. So, and it has changed, dramatically, as you might imagine. But I've got some experience, and I've worked with a lot of other agencies on other types of cyber crimes and in the early days, hackers and things like that.
Yeah, I just wanted people to know a little bit about that because on these various calls we talk about your background, but we don't have time on these short ones to talk about all the stuff you've done. And as you mentioned, you after leaving the military worked in private business for banks that we would have heard of and other tech companies. So you've just got a wide range of experience in this stuff and seeing the hidden dangers. And we really appreciate you sharing that with us. But also the idea that there are many potential law enforcement agencies. And the
Yeah.
first one to start with, if you've been defrauded, is your local police, because oftentimes a police report is needed to get an investigation going. So that's the first place that we would start. And depending on where you live and how busy the police department is, if you live in a small place, they may not have the officers. If you live in a big place, they may have a lot of other crime. But it's always worth it to get that piece of paper. So that would you agree, Dave, that that's a good first step?
Yeah, absolutely. We, for a number of reasons, having a police report number is a good thing, because if somewhere down the road your information is used and the bad guy is caught and they have to make restitution, there's a chance, not a very good chance, but a chance that you might be part of that restitution and get some money back if you have proof that you were a victim, and that police report would be your proof. Also, local police departments, we're in part of an investigative group, AARP is, and I'm one of the representatives that of all kinds of different types of fraud investigators. And a lot of police departments have fraud investigators to do localized frauds like credit card swipes and things like that in local arenas. So you never know, by reporting it to the police, you may actually have, this might be the tip of an iceberg in your local neighborhood, and help your local police or an adjacent police bureau to be able to catch somebody on a case they're running locally. Just because, if your credit card is stolen at a gas pump somewhere or an ATM, that could just as easily, and probably is, be a local group as opposed to a widespread nationwide group necessarily.
All right. Well, we've got one more question in the
Okay.
comments, and it's more of a comment. But Jan, thank you for posting that.
Yeah.
And she says, example is QR code on wedding invitations to go to a wedding website.
Great.
My son
Yeah.
did this.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I never would have thought of that. Of course, I'm a long way from weddings now, thank God. But
Yeah, well, boy, that's a can of worms. But I think we'll leave that. As I said, I've got my daughter's college graduation, so that's one step at a time.
yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, Jan, thank you for that. And that's all the questions and comments we've got. So that's probably a good place to leave it. We went a little long today, but we
Terrific.
enjoy going long. I mean,
Yeah.
if this is interactive for you, to help you stay safe from fraud. And again, thank you to Robin for sharing your story. A lot of times people don't want to, admit that fraud has happened to them, and that's not how fraud gets exposed. We really need people to come forward. So thank you for doing that. And again, send us an email. We can't promise we can solve crimes because Dave is not an active fraud investigator, and
Sadly.
bringing the bad guys to justice. But we will certainly use whatever tools and resources we have at our disposal to try and help you. So thank you for that. And as far as tools and resources, one thing that was mentioned, and I'll mention again, is the ARP Fraud Watch helpline. Dave is a volunteer on that, so he can talk a little bit about it. But it's volunteers who have been trained by ARP to talk to you about frauds and to give you personal advice and service and try and help you find the next steps. And it sounds like Robin may have gotten a little bit of that. Hopefully we can take it a little farther for her. But that's a great place to start. If you think you may have been a victim, or especially if you have a loved one who you might want advice for how to keep them safe. And that number is 877-908-3360, toll free, and you will talk to a live person. And Dave, do you want to talk a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, usually that number is, first of all, open to anybody. It's not just AARP members, and you don't have to be over a certain age. Anybody, your kids, your grandkids, yourself, anybody that is either been a victim or is curious about something, something seems suspicious or something that you didn't understand, you can call that number and we'll do our best to help you. What happens is, if you call, first you'll talk to somebody who basically will take your basic information. And sometimes they can give an answer right away. Other times, if your problem's a little more complex, they'll have somebody like me call you back, and we'll sit and talk for however long you need to talk about what your problem is, and we'll try to give you, like we did with Robin here, some resources, some ideas for who to talk to, or at least kind of explain to you what's going on and how this is a fraud, and maybe even help you identify areas that you may not have known about, that could be fraudulent, and it just will help you get your antenna for bad stuff tuned a little bit better for fraud, if you will.
All right. And as Dave mentioned, it's free. One thing I will mention is it's not like other call centers where they're trying to get your call done and resolved as fast as they can. This isn't that. So you can talk to somebody at some length and really dig into your problem.
And we won't
And I also mentioned I'm sorry?
We won't try to sell you anything.
No. There's no selling. We don't have any products. ARP has associations, but the Fraud Watch Network does not. And this is part of our larger fraud education program. And actually, the call center started here in Washington State with Washington State volunteers, and we're very proud of that. And it worked so well that the national office kind of adopted it, and now it's a nationwide program. So there are call centers across the country, and people who will talk to you from across the country, but you can't talk to someone here in Washington. And but be that as it may, we've made a good pitch here, Dave. So hopefully the phones will be ringing. Yeah. But if you just want to look at online, arp.org/fraud, there is a ton of information, videos, articles, all sorts of checklists for fraud. So if you'd like to learn more about fraud, be sure and check that out. Also, we've got our speakers hub. I mentioned that. That's where you can have a speaker from our Fraud Watch Network. Actually, it's two usually. Give a presentation about fraud to your group. You can check out our website for that at arp.org/WA Speakers Hub, and you'll get all the information. And there's an email address to contact us on that. And I'll put that up again, and we'll be looking for an email from Robin if she chooses to follow up with us. But that's if you'd like to get in contact with us about anything. Doesn't have to be fraud. That's just our email address. So with that, we've covered a lot of ground. Actually, let me look at the comments. And Robin says that she did call the helpline and talk to a nice lady who expressed sympathy, but unfortunately she was not able to figure that one out. So yeah, we will see what we can do.
Absolutely. Let us know your email address or your phone number, and I'll reach out to you, Robin, myself, and we'll talk about it.
All right. And Robin, I'm glad that you called the helpline. All right. So any last words? We've gotten off QR codes a little bit, but is there anything you'd like to leave it?
There is one other thing that we offer, and we probably want to start talking about it more on these sessions, is that we know that being a victim of fraud can be very, very stressful and shattering to people. And so one thing that AARP offers in conjunction with another volunteer agency is support groups. And we have a free support group for victims of fraud that you can attend as often or as few times as you want to. It's done over Zoom, over online. And it's basically for folks who are all victims or have been touched by fraud to get together and realize that they're not the only ones. That just because that they, there's no reason to feel stupid. There's no reason to feel like you knew it was wrong, but you did it anyway. How dumb can I be? Kind of thing that people tell me all the time on the helpline. So aarp.org/fraud support is that URL. And I'm sorry, Bruce, I didn't tell you this one. It just when we were talking came up, but aarp.org/fraud support, all one word. If you're interested in that, go to that. Again, it's free. All you do is the website will tell you how to contact the folks. And, I've been told that it helps people. I've been told that I'm not a counselor because I'm not I'm not in that business, but I've been told that folks that get on there and talk and just hear other people's stories, it makes them feel better. It makes them feel less alone, because many of the victims we talk to are isolated. They are they don't have many friends, or they, for whatever physical reason, they can't get out too much, and especially in the COVID era, a lot of people were isolated, and so it's good to talk, to hear that you're not the only one, and that the other people are having these same issues, and you give each other strength. So that's it. AARP.org/fraud support.
Okay. All right. Well, actually, I did not even know about that program, so
Yep.
I learned something. Uh, all right. So I will get that in the graphics for our next session.
Good.
And speaking of our next session, it'll be right here on Facebook and on YouTube next Friday at 10:30. It'll be, as I mentioned, a Q&A with Dave and our cyber host, Ann O'Callahan. She'll be fielding your questions, and she and Dave will be talking about it. So put that on your calendar. You sign on the same way you signed on to this. So it could not be easier. And thank you again for your questions. I will emphasize that we are crime fighters in the prevention sense. We unfortunately cannot investigate crimes after they happen. So that is up to law enforcement and the security agencies, et cetera. But we do our best to help inoculate you against being defrauded in the first place. So that's kind of what we're here to do. So anyway, thank you, Dave, for your time joining us and your expertise. Thank you to all of you for checking out Fraud Watch Friday. I'm going to put up a slide with the Fraud Watch Network helpline number and the our Fraud Watch website. So check that out if you'd like to, and if you enjoyed this content and got anything out of it, please share it with your friends, family. We would love to reach more people with this. So with that, we will see you next Friday.
See you later.